Big news! There's an upcoming balance change, long overdue, as many people would say, and others would say, thank goodness they're finally here. There's been a lot of talk recently about two main cards that the Hearthstone community has grown more and more tired of, and they've both been addressed. We'll start with the big daddy of cards that have been talked about. Yogg-Saron, Hope's End. In one famous World Championship or Regional Championship interview, one of the participants was asked, how did you win your matches, yada yada, and he said something along the lines of, well, I played Yogg.
Monsanto named this deck Yogg with a J, and I'm guessing
he's going for a jog.
He's going for a jog. I mean, I think that's how he says it because it's French.
Here it is.
All right.
Whose hopes are ending here?
No, it's not a bad start.
It's okay.
Sets up for swipe. Imagine if he gets intervenes.
All right, and what else we got? So many animations. Stand against darkness. That's not going to save him. Soul of the Forest. Bloodlust.
Okay,
Charge all of them. Master Portal!
Oh my goodness!
Oh my god, that was huge. That was absolutely huge. Now Monsanto has a gigantic board, cleared all of Dude's major threats. Dude's face says it all.
This Yogg will not stand, man.
That was a very aggressive Yogg, we have to say that. Just look at that face.
No.
It is.
Blizzard states, this is the most controversial card we've ever made. Yogg-Saron, Hope's End. It is slightly above average in two decks, Tempo Mage and Token Druid. And in fact, that's where you've seen this card quite a bit. In fact, he's even slipped his way into Control Warrior lists. I know that whenever I play Yogg-Saron, Twitch chat tends to encourage me to do so. It's a fun card to watch, but perhaps it is a bit too random. Perhaps, though, it was actually too strong. It is slightly above average in two decks, Tempo Mage and Token Druid. And in those decks, Yogg-Saron can turn things around. Like I was saying something along the lines of, it might not just be too random, it might be overpowered. And apparently, according to Blizzard data, it is slightly above average there. But even if it weren't slightly above average, maybe it's simply too random for competitive Hearthstone. Whenever Yogg dies, it will stop casting spells. So if it's destroyed, silenced, transformed, or returned to the owner's hand. Will this be too much for Yogg-Saron to handle? Will he be cut from competitive decks as a result? Well, when you're playing Yogg-Saron, you're usually hoping to play him from behind, and you're usually trying to clear the board. One could argue that if you clear the board, that's usually when Yogg-Saron dies, and so maybe he's still got a chance. The other side can argue, well, Yogg-Saron dies plenty of times from getting silenced or from getting Frog-Saroned, stuff like that. My instinct is that this is going to make Yogg not powerful enough to be played at the competitive level anymore. Even in the decks that it was best in, such as Tempo Mage and Token Druid, but I wouldn't actually be surprised if it weren't still decent enough. It's even possible that you might just play Yogg-Saron when you haven't cast that many spells, because that's when Yogg-Saron is less likely to die. Maybe like a 5 or 6 card Yogg-Saron is okay. According to Blizzard's stats, Yogg is relatively weak in power level for nearly every class at every level, other than Tempo Mage and Token Druid. Maybe Yogg-Saron is still good. I think it's not, but to play devil's advocate, maybe it is. I think a lot of people will be placated by this change. I didn't really think Yogg-Saron was that big of a problem. I know. Everyone watches the tournaments and sees the Yogg being played, and sometimes it changes the game. But really, usually, when Yogg is played, the person playing the Yogg is in a good position anyways, and then they still win. It's just Yogg-Saron does really flashy things. That said, it's a fine change. Now, the card that I was actually... The only card that I've really complained about is this little guy right here, Tuskarr Totemic. And when you played this guy on turn 3, if it summoned a Totem Golem, you pretty much won the game. Or a Manatide Totem. So that would mean like 2 out of 7 times you just won the game. Furthermore, the Flame Tongue Totem is also really good. And with the Spirit Claws being added, the Spell Damage Totem is really good. And even past that, just getting a basic totem isn't bad. Anyways, now you're only going to get basic totems from it, which means it's either a 3 mana 3/4 or a 3 mana 4/3 if you add up the stats. And that's not too impressive. It's possible this card is still going to be seen, especially in decks supporting a totem theme, such as those with Primal Fusion and with Wicked Witch Doctor. In fact, that's exactly what the blog post says. We want this card to be an option for decks that take advantage of extra totems through cards like Thing from Below or Primal Fusion. So perhaps with this change, you're going to see a reversion into the old Shaman lists with Tunnel Trog, because then you have another turn 3 play, Feral Spirit. Feral Spirit kind of started getting phased out because of the power of Tuskarr Totemic. Tunnel Trog got kind of phased out because of Spirit Claws. With a Tuskarr Totemic change like this, I expect that Shamans will just fall back to that and they'll still be perfectly fine. There's also a list of card changes that have been happening on the Classic set, just so that the cards don't permanently always see play. Rockbiter Weapon goes from 1 mana to 2 mana. That kind of makes sense. The Rockbiter Weapon is a really efficient 1 mana removal. There's no other 1 mana removal in the game, early game removal, that deals 3 damage, other than Arcane Blast, which requires a specific combo and you usually can't get it to. Anyways, the change from 1 mana to 2 mana will make Rockbiter Weapon completely unplayable. Lightning Bolt's 2 mana, not 1 mana. Yes, Lightning Bolt is another 1 mana solution, but it technically adds up to 2 mana. But along the lines of Tunnel Trog, with this Rockbiter Weapon change, I would expect to see Lightning Bolt come back in as well. Speaking of Tunnel Trog, Blizzard mentions in the blog post, we considered other Shaman cards like Tunnel Trog and Totem Golem, but these are both leaving Standard relatively soon, so we thought it would be better to change Rockbiter and improve the Standard format in a more permanent way. So indeed, for those of you who are still getting Tunnel Trog turn 1, fear not, because I would guesstimate 5 months? Your Totem, Golem, and Tunnel Trog will no longer bully you. Anyways, Rockbiter Weapon will now basically be 6 damage if you put it on Wind Fury. That's kind of too specific, so it will probably not see any play. Call of the Wild! 8 mana to 9 mana. So here's a story about Call of the Wild and Whispers of the Old Gods. So, in Whispers of the Old Gods, a number of streamers got to preview a card. Mine was Servant of Yogg-Saron. And we won't really go into how that card has fared and constructed. But it turns out that the pictures that every single streamer had was posted. And the guy who had this picture, it was pretty obvious given that there was a picture of Misha, of Huffer, and Leok. We all theorized, okay, it's probably a card that summons Misha, Huffer, and Leok. And in fact, it was exactly that. And then I theorized, alright, what's a fair mana cost for this card? Well, Animal Companion is a good card. That costs 3. If you lump all 3 into one card, I mean, that's still probably too good even for 9 mana. So they're probably going to price this at 10 mana. That's roughly what I said. So it turns out that when you're combining multiple cards into one card, you usually have to associate the mana savings or the mana expenses that you need to add on to a card when it does multiple things. This one's like as if your Animal Companion got buffed into 3 mana Animal Companion, draw an Animal Companion. So Call of the Wild has been a very powerful card in every single hunter deck, mostly carrying hunters just because of the sheer value of the card. At 9 mana, I argue it's still extremely valuable, as it takes a very strong card, Animal Companion, and 3+3+3 equals 9, but you get to do it all in one card. It's still good. It's obviously less good. A nerf of 1 mana is a big deal, but this is one of those cards that might still see play, or maybe even will see play, like probably see play, even with a nerf of 1 mana. Execute. Well, Execute's been just about in every single Warrior deck, and Warrior is a pretty dominant class right now. In large part due to this hard removal. I feel like this is another one of those cards that might still see play, or maybe even probably will still see play at an increase of 1 mana. I mean, this mana, changing from a 1 mana card to a 2 mana card is even a bigger deal than changing from an 8 mana card to a 9 mana card, because you've doubled the mana cost of Execute. You're gonna be able to fit this in much less often with cards like Whirlwind, with Ravaging Ghoul. It's gonna be tougher to get all this mana, but it's still probably good. Kind of reminds me of Hunter's Mark, which was increased in mana cost from 0 to 1. Hunter's Mark is currently not seeing any play at all, but Hunters have less of an ability to deal 1 damage to a bunch of stuff than Warriors do. It's a big nerf, but I feel like it will still see play. And the other Warrior change is the card Charge is getting changed. This pretty much affects only 1 or 2 decks if you consider the 2 decks differently. Finally eliminates the Worgen Charge 1 turn kill Warrior deck, where you would play a Raging Worgen, you would charge the Raging Worgen, you would inner rage the Raging Worgen. So with just those cards, you are dealing 3 for the Raging Worgen, +2 for the inner rage, +2 for the charge, that's 7, +1 for the enrage of the Raging Worgen, that's 8, and then you attack twice with it, so that's 16 damage. And if you play a Faceless Manipulator on that Raging Worgen, that's 32 damage. For only 5 cards? Raging Worgen, Inner Rage, Charge, Faceless. Only 4 cards, that's actually pretty amazing. And sometimes he threw in Rampage there, and then he didn't need the Faceless Manipulator. While 1 turn kill Raging Worgen is not particularly fun or interactive, it was not that big of a deal in the meta. However, it's one of those changes that needs to happen in order to make sure that it doesn't happen in the future when more cards are printed that could be really abusive of Charge, for example. In the future, these shenanigans will no longer be possible, as you can only attack enemy minions from here on out. Charge sure has underwent a long and storied history from alpha of the game, when it was 0 mana, give all of your friendly minions charge this turn for 0 mana. And then it changed into 1 mana, give a friendly minion charge, into 3 mana, give a friendly minion +2 attack and charge. The Hearthstone team thought, okay, that's going to be enough. Who's going to pay 3 mana for that? And then LOK Shadow comes out with that Raging Worgen deck with charge, and we kind of knew it would still happen, but we thought it wouldn't be good enough, and it actually is still good enough. So, okay, now we're not going... Now we fear charge. It can no longer provide uninteractive gameplay. So there's the change. It's probably more of a consideration of a future change. Final card that got changed, Abusive Sergeant, down from a 2/1 to a 1/1. Still 1 mana for 3/1 of stats, of which 2 is attack. 2 is immediate, because if you have a card on the board, you get to immediately apply the +2 attack. This card is still in the realm of playability, which is impressive, but will certainly not be an auto-include in these aggressive decks now. This joins the Leper Gnome as the 1 mana 1/1 crew now. Some people, including me, I think, argued back when, about a year ago, when the changes were announced to Year of the Kraken, that Leper Gnome was getting reduced from 1 mana 2/1 to 1 mana 1/1. It's like, oh, maybe Abusive Sergeant is actually the problem. And when we were at a summit, I believe Dog was very vocal about the Abusive Sergeant, and now it's finally getting changed. So here you go. All in all, I feel like these are really healthy changes. The Tuskarr Totemic and the Yogg-Saron changes should be very welcomed by the community. The Rockbiter weapon, Call of the Wild, and Abusive Sergeant and Execute changes are going to make Hearthstone a less auto-include these cards in the deck from the core set, which is good. In addition to these, I look forward to the new year when the 3 sets of League of Explorers, Blackrock Mountain, and the Grand Tournament rotate out. Perhaps there will be more changes to the core set at that time. Similar to what Blizzard alluded to, core set will stay around, but they'll keep an eye out on those cards so that the core set isn't going to always bring such powerful cards and they'll always be included forever. As a reminder, the new year will be coming around whenever the first expansion of 2017 is released. No one knows when that will happen yet.